Jocelyn had just returned from another weekend with her lover. This had been going on for 6 months. At first, she covered her tracks by claiming she was visiting her mother, but lately, she had stopped offering explanations altogether. I had been too trusting, and it took me longer than it should have to piece things together. Finn Prescott had been part of Jocelyn's life long before I met her. They were together for years until he decided to enlist in the Air Force, leaving her behind. I came into the picture as the rebound, married her, and we built a life together, raising 2 children. For 23 years, things were good, until they weren't. Our son Brent had settled into a job with the post office in Baltimore, and our daughter Elise was married and living in Allentown. I had imagined that once the kids moved out, Jocelyn and I would enjoy a new chapter as empty nesters. I was wrong. I worked for my Uncle Simon, driving a gravel truck. The work was demanding, but it paid well. We had 2 late-model cars, no credit card debt, and had even planned to renovate the house, despite the mortgage being upside down. As tensions at home grew, I decided to dig deeper. Jocelyn's mother lived in Pottsville, yet Jocelyn was spending her weekends in Frackville with Finn. Frackville wasn't a large town, so it didn't take much effort to find where he lived, a small rental in an older neighborhood. A visit to my mother-in-law confirmed what I suspected. Jocelyn hadn't been staying with her. In fact, she had barely visited, and when she did, it was never for more than an hour. When Jocelyn walked through the door that Sunday evening, I confronted her immediately. "When exactly were you planning to tell me about your weekends with Finn?" She set her overnight bag down and dropped onto the couch, her expression unreadable. Finn retired from the Air Force last March and rented a house in Frackville. He got my number from my sister, and we've been catching up, reminiscing about old times. All weekend, her tone sharpened. "Trevor, Finn and I were together long before you and I met. We share a connection, something deep, something real. It's a kind of compatibility and intimacy we never had. Being with him just feels natural." "So what you're saying is that the 2 of you are soulmates?" "Yes, I know how that sounds, but it's the truth." "And what about us? 23 years, 2 kids, what was that?" She exhaled sharply as if exhausted by the conversation. "Life is about choices. When you can't have what you really want, you go with an alternative. That's what you were, Trevor. My alternative." "An alternative? After all these years?" She rolled her eyes. "For heaven's sake, don't be so dramatic. I was a good wife, a good mother. Now I just want a little time for myself." Silence hung between us before I finally asked, "Does he know you're married?" "Yes, and he understands. He knows leaving was a mistake, and he regrets it. He realizes that marrying you was something I had to do, and he forgives me for it." I blinked. "He forgives you for marrying me? Do you hear yourself?" "Trevor, calm down. Why are you making this into such a big deal?" I let out a slow breath, barely keeping my temper in check. If being with him feels so right, why not just move in with him? He's dealing with some legal issues. His ex-wife is divorcing him and demanding 48% of his Air Force retirement pay. Until that's settled, it's best to keep things quiet. Is he even working? He's in transition. There's not much demand for ground equipment technicians around here, and he wants to stay local. So, Jocelyn, what exactly are your plans?" Her frustration boiled over. I don't know. I don't want to talk about this anymore." Without another word, she grabbed her overnight bag and headed to the bedroom. I stayed in the living room, spending the night in the recliner. By Monday morning, once she had left for work, I put my own plans in motion. I started with the finances, closing accounts, canceling policies, securing my exit fund. There was a $30,000 home improvement loan that had already been approved, and I made sure to claim every penny. My '57 Chevy fetched nearly $20,000. As for my Harley Fatboy, I had a different plan for that. The IRA, cashed out, penalty and all, the safety deposit box held 4 certificates of deposit, which I liquidated. Uncle Simon didn't have a retirement plan for me to tap into, but I had something better. 6 years of payments into a surprise 6-month cruise for what was supposed to be our 25th wedding anniversary. That was another $30,000 in my pocket. My Snap-on tools sold quickly, and I turned my Krugerrands into cash. One way or another, I was going to make sure this played out on my terms. The Riverside Public Housing Project hadn't changed much in 25 years. Cedric Langley, on the other hand, had. We grew up together, but time had worked on him in ways that weren't exactly flattering. His Dominican and Italian heritage had given him a mix of features, but now he was bigger, hairier, and rougher than I remembered. Still, the reunion was a good one. After polishing off a six-pack, I slid a photo and all the information I had on Finn Prescott across the table. Cedric's eyes lit up when I placed the title and keys to my fat boy in front of him. "Trevor, this is too much. You don't have to bribe me. I'd do it for free," he said, shaking his head. "That's not why I'm giving it to you," I replied. "I'm leaving town and need to find a home for it. You were the first guy I thought of. Ride it, take care of it, and if I ever come back, you can hand it back. If you need cash, sell it. Simple as that." He nodded, running his hand over the keys. "All right. So, you want me to rough this guy up? Make sure he lands in the hospital? What if he doesn't take the hint? Then wait a couple of months. If he's still sneaking around with Jocelyn, pay him another visit. After 2 trips to the ER, he should start getting the message. The guy needs to be taken down a notch. When do you want it done? Give it 2 weeks. And after that, I'll be long gone. No phone, no mail, no contact. Maybe I'll send you a Christmas card." It was a good thing we were out of beer, or I might have stayed all night. Jocelyn wasn't home when I got back. That was fine. I had no intention of sticking around much longer. My future living situation was going to be compact, so I was packing light. She had finally gotten the life she wanted. Now, I was going after mine. A Nordic Tug 26. Every man has a dream. Mine was simple, but it always felt out of reach. There was no convincing Jocelyn to live on a boat, so I had pushed the idea aside for years. Now, I didn't have to ask for her approval. The hardest part was finding one I could afford without leaving myself broke. Luckily, the internet made shopping easy. By the time I arrived at my son Brent's place, he had just gotten home from work. He looked surprised to see me, which told me he hadn't spoken to his mother yet. I gave him a straightforward version of events, careful not to trash Jocelyn outright, but making sure he understood the situation. He wasn't happy, but he got it. Brent agreed to hold on to a few important things for me, like my birth certificate and DD 214. He also agreed to act as a discreet contact if I needed anything down the road. Before leaving, I signed over the title to my truck and told him where to pick it up in Annapolis. He was still single, but had a steady girlfriend he saw as marriage material. We spent the night catching up, and by morning, we both left the house at the same time. I found it amusing that my phone had been on the entire time, yet not a single call had come from Jocelyn. An hour later, I was having breakfast in Annapolis before heading to the marina. The morning was spent handling paperwork and getting everything in order. After lunch, I went through a full walkthrough of the boat's operational and safety systems. My earlier decision to get a Coast Guard BS and S certification turned out to be a smart move. With the Yanmar service manual and help from the marina's technician, I put together a kit of spare parts and extra tools, enough to handle minor fixes until I could reach a proper service facility. I stocked up on charts covering the intracoastal waterway, as well as marina listings for the East and Gulf coasts. One set went onto my Kindle, and the other was spiral-bound for easy reference. The ladies in the marina office were more than happy to help me outfit the galley with essentials. One indulgence I allowed myself was a small solar panel kit and a complete LED lighting package for the boat. It wasn't a priority, but it would be a good project for slow days. Everything came together smoothly. That evening, Brent's girlfriend drove him to the marina, where I gave them both a tour of the tug. We had dinner together, and when he left, he took the truck with him. Just like that, I was officially unencumbered. At sunrise, I slipped out of the marina with 75 gallons of fuel and 50 gallons of water. No destination, no fixed plan. If I managed my fuel wisely, I had enough money to last a year. A major mechanical failure would ruin me, but I had no choice but to move forward and hope for the best. For the next 2 weeks, I familiarized myself with my new home. I tested the boat's fuel efficiency and got comfortable with the instrumentation and worked through the electronics. Most marinas and waterfront restaurants had free Wi-Fi, which I took full advantage of. I downloaded books onto my Kindle and worked through additional Coast Guard courses, including safety and weather training. At some point, I made a note to look into getting onboard internet access. I wasn't heading anywhere in particular, yet I found myself steadily drifting south. The trip was getting close, and while I was eager, I was also cautious. I had no experience, but I had nothing to lose. It was time to go for it. I quickly learned that eating at marinas and waterfront restaurants was an expensive habit. If I wanted my money to last, I needed to figure out proper onboard cooking. More books were downloaded, and I started experimenting. One way or another, I was going to make this work. There was one stretch of the trip that had me a little concerned about fuel. With my limited supply, I didn't want to take any risks, so I picked up a collapsible fuel bladder as a precaution. The pantry was stocked, and I felt as ready as I could be. The small solar panel system I had rigged up was proving to be a solid investment. It fed into a compact, tucked-away lawnmower battery, which in turn powered the LED lighting throughout the boat and provided a convenient little charging station for my phone. I was leaving the Honga River, making my way toward Bloodworth Island, when I spotted a figure frantically waving from the back of a large white yacht. The boat had run aground, wedged into the shrubby shoreline. Only the rear half was visible in the fading daylight. As I got closer, I could see it was a well-maintained Chris-craft, except for its current predicament. There were no running lights, no movement, nothing but the woman at the stern trying to flag me down. "Hello, can't you help me out?" Her voice cut through the evening air. Up close, she wasn't as young as I first thought. Late 20s maybe, wearing what looked like a cocktail dress. "You need me to radio for help?" I called back. "Heavens no. Whatever you do, don't call anyone." "All right. Want to ride somewhere?" By now, my tug had drifted alongside the stranded yacht. I cut the motor and tied up. "Yes, but I need to do something first." "You run out of fuel?" "Maybe. I don't know. It just stopped running and drifted into the trees." "Where were you headed?" "Nowhere in particular. Why all the questions?" "Just curious. What do you need to do?" "Do you have any gas?" "Gasoline won't do you any good. That thing runs on diesel." She didn't seem surprised. "I know that." "Do you have any or not?" I grabbed a 2-gallon can of unleaded from storage and passed it over the railing. She took it without a word and disappeared toward the front of the boat. A few seconds later, I saw her walking back along the deck, pouring the gas as she went. That answered my question. Casually, I loosened the tether line, watching as she finished her task. When she returned, she handed back the empty can, along with the flare gun kit from the helm. Clutching a small handbag, she straddled the rail and jumped onto my tug. "Permission to come aboard, Captain?" she asked with a grin that was just a little too wide for the situation. I couldn't help but smirk at the macabre humor. As I cast off the line and started the engine, she calmly opened the flare kit. I was already backing away when she loaded and fired, striking the rear of the yacht on the first try. There was no dramatic explosion, just a slow, creeping fire that spread from the stern toward the prow. We were about 100 feet away when the whole boat was engulfed in flames. A few minutes later, 2 muffled detonations sent thick clouds of smoke billowing into the sky. By then, night had fully settled in, making it harder to see anything beyond the flickering glow. "Hi," she said, turning to me with a satisfied expression. "My name's Hope. What's yours?" 10 minutes later, after a brief introductory chat, my unexpected guest had fallen fast asleep. One moment she was talking, the next she was out cold. I didn't mind. It gave me a chance to focus on navigating back to the main channel. I had no idea what I had just gotten myself into, but I knew one thing. It was best to put some distance between us and the smoldering wreck before anyone started asking questions. Cruising at night was peaceful, though it required extra attention. I wasn't exactly relaxed, considering the circumstances, but the quiet helped me settle down. At some point, I threw a light blanket over Hope. She wasn't exactly dressed for a night on the water. By sunrise, I found a quiet inlet off the channel and dropped anchor. As soon as I had coffee perking, my guest popped her head out of the hatch. "Good morning, Trevor. Sorry for dozing off last night. The coffee smells great. Where the hell are we? And where's the bathroom?" It seemed she liked to talk. I tossed her a t-shirt and a pair of sweatpants, the best I could offer under the circumstances. A few minutes later, we were both sitting on deck with steaming mugs of coffee. The shirt was a little big on her, but the sweats, though too long, fit her well enough at the waist. "All right, Miss Hope," I said, leaning back. "Mind telling me what's going on, or is it none of my business?" She exhaled, blowing on her coffee. "It's Mrs., actually. Mrs. Warren Easton. I've only been married 6 weeks, and it looks like it's already over. I take it that boat belonged to your husband?" A small, satisfied smile played on her lips. "It was a glorious sight, wasn't it? I'm assuming you had a good reason for what you did." "Absolutely." The channel was quiet, and we sat in silence for a while, watching the occasional boat pass by. I poured us both another round of coffee, deciding not to push for details just yet. It was clear she would talk when she was ready. Eventually, she glanced over. Trevor, do you mind if I call my father? I don't want him to worry. Go ahead. I've got some maintenance to do anyway. Take your time. Most of what I had to do wasn't urgent, but I used the time to check our exact location, update my fuel and water logs, and make a few notes. It was a solid 20 minutes before my uninvited guest resurfaced. Hope approached me with her phone in hand, a somewhat sheepish expression on her face. Trevor, if you're not too busy, my father would like to have a word with you. Do you mind? Without waiting for my answer, she handed me the phone and disappeared below deck. I took the call. Hello? A solid opening, I thought. Mr. Dalton, my name is Franklin Holloway. I am Hope's father. It seems my daughter has gotten herself into a bit of a situation, and I'd like to ask you for a favor. Go on. Would you be able to keep her on board for a few days while I straighten things out? Of course, I will make sure you're adequately compensated for the inconvenience. I hesitated. Mr. Holloway, I have a very small boat. She's not going to be comfortable. That's fine. I don't want her to be comfortable. I want her to be safe. That caught my attention. Safe? You don't even know me. How can leaving your daughter with a stranger be considered safe? It's the best option I have right now. Besides, this was her idea, not mine. Sorry, not gonna happen. I'll take her as far as Yorktown. Make arrangements for someone to pick her up there. I'll call back later this evening. Let me speak to Hope again, please. I handed the phone back and spent the next hour trying to place the name Franklin Holloway. It rang a bell, but I couldn't quite pin down why. Meanwhile, my unexpected guest had figured out how to use the compact shower, though she clearly wasn't familiar with rationing water on a boat. I'd have to talk to her about that. Just as I was wondering what was taking her so long, she called up, "Trevor, brunch is ready." I hadn't expected anything, so it was a pleasant surprise to find a plate of hot scrambled eggs and Spam waiting for me. She had managed to navigate the galley with ease, and the food was pretty good. We ate in comfortable silence, cleaning up quickly before settling back into the cockpit with fresh coffee. Hope studied me for a moment before speaking. "Why did you turn my father down? Not many people say no to him." I took a sip of my coffee. "Your father doesn't know me, and I don't know you. I didn't feel comfortable with what he was proposing. I'd rather just drop you off somewhere than get caught up in something that's none of my business." She nodded. "That's what he said too. But I told him I feel safe with you and would prefer to stay if possible." "Why would you say that?" She smiled slightly. "I'm a good judge of character. All right, tell me about your husband." Hope let out a long breath. "Warren was my father's choice. It was a mistake. I told him it was a mistake, but he didn't listen. Now I've landed myself in a mess, and the only way out is to ask my father for help again. Trevor, I make a lot of mistakes. My father did his best to raise me to be responsible, and I keep letting him down. I need his help, but right now, I also need to get away from this whole situation." That was enough explanation for now. I pulled in the lines and moved to the helm. 5 minutes later, we were cruising south at a steady, relaxed pace. Hope sat quietly in the cockpit, staring out at the water. 2 hours later, her phone chirped again. She glanced at the screen before handing it to me. "All right, Mr. Dalton," Franklin Holloway said. "I've done my homework. It took a couple of hours, but you checked out just fine. Sorry about your marital troubles, but it seems you're handling things well. Can you be in Yorktown by tomorrow?" I took a moment to absorb what he was saying. I wasn't slow, just cautious. "Mr. Dalton, are you still there?" "Yeah, I'm here, just thinking it through." "Take your time. If you can make it to Yorktown, tie up at Wormley Creek Marina. I'll have someone meet you there." "If someone is meeting us, why not just take her with them? I don't understand." "Mr. Dalton, I assume you're on a planned trip down the coast. I don't want to disrupt your travels, but I'd like you to take Hope with you for a week or so. Think of it as an interesting diversion." I frowned. "Mr. Holloway, I'm not set up for guests, and your daughter doesn't have the clothing or belongings for a trip like this. That will be taken care of tomorrow. Don't worry about it. Now, can I speak to my daughter?" By noon the next day, we arrived at Wormley Creek Marina. Our arrival hadn't gone unnoticed. Waiting for us were 2 people, a middle-aged man in a suit and a young woman in athletic wear. Hope waved at them as we debarked, making it clear she knew the woman well. We joined them at an outdoor table overlooking the docks. "Mr. Dalton, my name is Marshall, and this is Miss Templeton," the suited man introduced himself. "We'll keep this brief." I leaned back in my chair. Why rush? I've got all the time in the world. No need to hurry on my account. Can I get a cold beer? Hope smirked at my comment, while Marshall hesitated, momentarily thrown off. He pulled a briefcase onto the chair beside him and started pulling out manila folders. I groaned. Nothing good ever came from manila folders. He caught the reaction. "Sorry, Mr. Dalton, just some minor formalities." Before he could continue, Miss Templeton interrupted. "I hate to break in, but Hope and I have things to take care of. We'll be back in an hour. Have lunch, take your time." Marshall looked flustered by her casual attitude, but I found it refreshing. Marshall burned through a mountain of paperwork in the next 30 minutes. New cell phones, special credit cards, and a thick stack of cash. I didn't say much until he slid over a medical power of attorney form. That one made me pause. She's only going to be with me for a week or so. Why would I need this? He gave me a practiced smile. "It's just a precaution, nothing to worry about." That didn't sit right with me. This was getting deeper than I liked. With an exasperated sigh, I held up a hand. "Enough. I need another beer and lunch." Marshall agreed, but I noticed something odd. Despite all the arrangements being made, I hadn't been given a single piece of backstory beyond what I already knew. As far as I could tell, Hope was a rich girl who got into an argument with her husband, ran off, and torched a $500,000 boat without a second thought. Now, her father expected me to babysit her indefinitely. I knew nothing about her beyond that she was reckless and, by all indications, spoiled. Only a fool would sign up for this. By the time Hope and Miss Templeton returned, arms full of shopping bags, Marshall and I had finished our meal and a couple more drinks. The two women wasted no time stowing the new wardrobe in the cabin. Then things got serious. Marshall shifted the conversation, revealing just how much Franklin Holloway was willing to pay me for my services. A special bank account had already been set up in my name, with deposits scheduled on a rolling basis. What happened to a week or so? Somewhere between last night and today, this arrangement had been upgraded to long-term, and no one had bothered to ask if I was on board with that. I was about to tell them all to go to hell when Marshall quietly slid a piece of paper toward me, a copy of the first deposit. The number was staggering. No matter how pissed off I wasn't dumb enough to refuse. "Mr. Marshall," I said carefully, "I don't mean to sound ungrateful, but how long are we talking about here?" He just shrugged. A few minutes later, he and Miss Templeton left. I found it amusing that he conveniently stuck me with the bill. Then again, with the amount of money now sitting in my account, I didn't care. As I readied to cast off, I turned to my new ward. "Lucy, you got a lot of explaining to do." She giggled at my bad Daisy Arnaz impression. We left the marina, heading south to the channel before finding a quiet cove to anchor for the evening. Neither of us was particularly hungry, so we snacked and sipped beer instead. It didn't take long to get a clearer picture of Hope's world. Her family's fortune came from real estate. Old money, very old money. Her husband, Warren, was from new money, mostly Wall Street investments. She didn't know much about his family's business, only that they had more wealth than her father. The marriage had been arranged in a sense. When she admitted that, I raised an eyebrow. She responded with a groan. Hope had only been married 6 weeks when Warren decided his wife should entertain some of his fraternity brothers. He figured the Chris Craft would be the perfect venue for their little get-together. Things didn't go as planned. Now, her father was working on an annulment, while Warren stewed in his humiliation. Miss Templeton had informed Hope that her husband was furious, not just because of what she had done, but because she had embarrassed him in front of his peers. The yacht had been the pride of his family, and now it was gone. His parents were furious, his friends were laughing at him, and in public, he swore revenge. Franklin Holloway wasn't willing to take chances on what kind of revenge Warren had in mind, hence all the precautions. Life on the tug became a bit cramped with a new body and an influx of luggage. What had once been a comfortable living space now felt a little too tight. Fortunately, Hope wasn't completely useless on a boat. She had grown up around them, so she wasn't clueless about basic upkeep. We quickly figured out how to make things work. She took over keeping the tug neat and organized, while I handled mechanical and operational matters. She actually enjoyed planning meals and cooking. We settled into a rhythm. Refueling stops included supply runs and laundry service. Normally, I wouldn't have spent the money on laundry service, but considering my new financial situation, I didn't mind the luxury. We weren't covering much distance, but we were enjoying the trip. I had no destination in mind, and for the first time in a long while, I was just living in the moment. Then I made the mistake of calling my son. "Brent, it's Dad. Just checking in, seeing how things are back home." There was a pause before his voice came through, laced with irritation. About time. It's been almost 3 months. What the hell have you been doing? Just cruising and snoozing. Everything's perfect on my end. What's happening in Pennsylvania? For starters, Mom is not happy, Brent said without hesitation. You wiped everything clean before you left, and she's feeling it. She called here a bunch of times at first, but I finally convinced her I had no idea where you were. That got her to stop. But she knows about the boat. I frowned. How'd she figure that out? Some papers and documents accidentally got sent to the old address. She put two and two together real fast. I sighed. Well, it was going to come out sooner or later. What's she doing about it? Not much she can do. She and the bank are butting heads. Between the mortgage and that home improvement loan, she can't cover the payments. Hell, she can't even keep up with the utilities. What's her plan? She picked up a job at Target, but it's barely above minimum wage, and it's not even full-time. She's been selling off stuff to make ends meet. Naturally, your things went first. I should have grabbed those Snap-on tools when I had the chance. I smirked. I figured her new boyfriend would be helping her out. Brent let out a short laugh. That's a joke. From what I can tell, even with his pension, he can barely keep himself afloat, let alone her. He paused before adding, speaking of good old Finn, he's pretty damn mad at you. I think he's trying to find you. Mom mentioned something about retribution. That got my attention. Oh, hell. I wasn't expecting that. He was supposed to be remorseful, not out for revenge. If you're talking about that little visit from Cedric, I don't think things went the way you guys planned. A knot formed in my stomach. What do you mean? I haven't talked to Cedric. He was just going to rough Finn up a little, make sure he got the message. Brent hesitated. Yeah, well, that didn't happen. Turns out Finn is a black belt in something. I don't think Cedric knew that, because he ended up getting the crap beat out of him. He barely got out of there in one piece. I exhaled sharply. That wasn't how it was supposed to go. Well, now Finn's looking for you, and he's pissed. According to Mom, he wants payback bad. And I think he's trying to track your phone. I keep it off most of the time, I said, rubbing my temples. Good to know, though. Thanks for the update. I'll check in again in a couple of weeks. Don't worry about me. I'm fine. I ended the call, only to find Hope sitting across from me, grinning like she had just heard the best joke of the year. Gee, Trevor, she said, resting her chin in her hand. Looks like we've got two pissed-off guys trying to hunt us down. I raised an eyebrow. Warren, too? She nodded. According to my dad, Warren has taken an extended leave from work and is dead set on finding me. Apparently, he's obsessed with making me pay for what I did. I scoffed. For what? Setting his yacht on fire? Oh, it's not just that. Destroying the Easton yacht was a direct insult to both him and his family. He thinks he needs to get revenge to restore his honor. I stared at her. What century does this guy think we're living in? She shrugged. My dad's trying to get more information, but right now, Warren has disappeared. No one knows where he is. Is he prone to violence? Hope gave me a hard look. He's been arrested at least 3 times for assault that I know of, but his father always pulled strings to make sure the charges never went to trial. I leaned back and ran a hand down my face. Well, that's just fantastic. I feel like someone just hung a target around both of our necks. Hope stretched, as if none of this bothered her. Trevor, I would love a cold beer and a hot pizza tonight. Are we anywhere close to civilization? I shook my head at her nonchalance, but couldn't argue with her plan. 10 minutes later, we were back underway. The pizza sounded good, but the beer sounded better. After months of living together in tight quarters, Hope and I had settled into a comfortable routine. Our relationship remained strictly platonic, something we never even felt the need to discuss. The 15-year age gap had a way of tempering any potential awkwardness. We enjoyed each other's company, shared evening beers in moderation, and had fallen into an easy companionship. If anything, it resembled a father-daughter dynamic more than anything else. Neither of us seemed to want or expect anything more. Still, the lingering issue of 2 men actively hunting us down had me uneasy. Both seemed to believe they had legitimate grievances, and while I wasn't eager to face either of them, I also knew I couldn't keep running forever. Something had to give. The first call I made was to Warren. His marriage to Hope had been annulled a month ago, so at least that mess was officially over. Warren, how's life treating you? I said, keeping my tone light. It's Trevor, the guy who took your wife. The response was immediate and colorful. A rapid string of expletives flew through the receiver before he barked. Where the hell are you, you miserable son of a... I cut him off. Relax, I think it's time we had a little chat. How soon can you get to Savannah? Tomorrow. Is that soon enough for you? I was thinking Saturday morning. Gives you a couple of days to get yourself together. I'll call you tomorrow to set the exact time and place. I'll be waiting. I ended the call without another word. Hope had been listening, her expression somewhere between amused and alarmed. You're not actually going to meet him, are you? The man is insane and dangerous. He'll probably bring a gun. I nodded, appreciating her concern. I'm working on it. I need to make another call first. A quick internet search got me the information I needed. Time to finish the setup. It wasn't difficult to track down Finn's number. Finn, my old friend, I greeted smoothly. I've got a new pair of dancing shoes and I'm dying to try them out. You interested? His voice turned to a growl. You know damn well I am. Where the hell are you? You won't get away this time. I'm not trying to run, I assured him. We need to talk. Sounds like you need an attitude adjustment, and I'm the guy to handle that. He let out a short, humorless laugh. Your buddy Cedric already tried. Didn't work out too well for him. Can you be in Savannah by Saturday morning? I'm already halfway there. Good. Meet me at 10 a.m. in the food court at Fairway Mall. Come alone and wear a red hat. What's with the stupid hat? That's the deal. No cap, no meeting. If I'm going to kick someone's ass, I want to make sure it's the right one. You're a funny man, Trevor. I'll be there. You better show. The second I ended the call, Hope erupted into giggles. You silly old man. You don't know any martial arts, do you? You're going to get creamed. I just grinned and shrugged. We sat on deck, watching the sunset, sipping our beers in comfortable silence. Before calling it a night, I made one last phone call. Wardy boy, it's Trevor. Just finalizing our meeting plans. A deep sigh. It's Warren, you asswipe. Nobody calls me Wardy. I'm almost at the Georgia line. Where's this happening? Fairway Mall, Friday at 10 a.m., food court. I'll be the guy in the red cap, wearing my dancing shoes. Why the hell should I care about your shoes? Because I'll be kicking your puny little ass. I didn't wait for a response. I just turned the phone off. Hope was still giggling. She sure did that a lot. That night, we berthed at Freeport Marina, took care of maintenance, and treated ourselves to a solid crab cake dinner. The sky had turned ominous, so I was glad we had made it into a safe harbor before the storm rolled in. By the time we got back to the tug, the squall was nearly on top of us. We double-checked the mooring lines, secured everything, and locked up for the night. A few hours later, the storm hit with full force. Thunder, lightning, and howling winds rattled the boat. The sudden fury of it all must have gotten to Hope because, without a word, she crawled into bed beside me. Neither of us acknowledged it. We just rode out the storm in silence. By morning, the sky had cleared. Hope was still asleep when I got up, so I left her to it. When she finally emerged topside, I handed her a mug of fresh coffee. Nothing was said about the sleeping arrangements. Since it was Friday, we decided to stretch our legs and walk to the breakfast club for brunch. The place was busy, but we managed to get a seat at the counter near the TV. At exactly 10:30 a.m., the local news broke in with a special report. There was a shooting this morning at the Fairway Mall. An unidentified man wearing a red hat was gunned down in the mall food court for no apparent reason. The shooter refused to drop his weapon and was subsequently shot by mall security. Both men were pronounced dead at the scene. Authorities are working to identify the individuals and determine the motive behind the confrontation. I put down my fork and leaned back. Hope exhaled and muttered, "Well, that's one way to solve a problem." I just nodded. The news report was serious, and I wasted no time paying the bills so we could get out of the restaurant. Hope, on the other hand, could barely contain herself. "You devious, dirty son of a—" She paused, giggling. "You planned that all along, didn't you?" "Of course not. How could you even think such a thing?" I said, feigning innocence. We spent the rest of the day unwinding, finishing off the last of our beer supply. That night, we slept together again, not in that way, just in the way two people who had grown comfortable with each other did. By early morning, the tug was already heading south, while Hope was still asleep below deck. That afternoon, I decided it was time to check in with Brent. After the usual pleasantries, I got to the real question. "How's your mother doing?" "She's still mad as hell," Brent replied. "Nothing's going right for her. She can't pay the bills, and from what I can tell, she hasn't seen her boyfriend in over a week. He told her he had some business to take care of and just disappeared." I raised an eyebrow. "That's interesting. What's her plan now?" "She finally struck a deal with the bank. They're taking the house back. And on a slightly happier note, She signed and returned the divorce papers. She actually seemed relieved about that. That stopped me cold. What divorce papers? You didn't file for divorce? Hell no. Where and when would I have even been able to do that? All I know is that some guy came to the house with all the papers and a check for $20,000. She signed the documents, took the check, and basically shoved the guy out the door. She thought you had filed. I sat there, silent for a moment. Brent and I talked for a bit longer about other things. He and his girlfriend were considering a Christmas wedding and wanted to know if I'd be able to attend. I assured him I'd do my best and then casually asked him if he could make it a +1. Naturally, that comment opened a floodgate of questions, none of which I answered. I didn't say a word about Finn's sudden disappearance either. By the time I hung up, Hope was groggily making her way topside, desperately in need of coffee. We spent the next 2 days in Jacksonville, and it didn't take long for Hope to dig up some answers. Her father had arranged my divorce. When I asked why he'd do something like that, she gave a simple answer: because she asked him to. I had plenty of questions about the legality of it, about why she thought she had the right, but I let it go. It wouldn't change anything now, but then she blindsided me with another conversation, the kind I had been carefully avoiding. Did I think she was pretty? Did I think she was too young for me? Was I too old for her? Was I embarrassed to be seen with her? The questions went on, and I felt the walls closing in. Somewhere over the past few months, she had developed feelings for me. I had never even considered crossing that line, but the truth was, I had grown attached to her too. Still, the age gap was too much. I had made a point to keep things strictly platonic, and now she was forcing a conversation I wasn't ready for. That night, I slept in the galley. By the time she emerged in the morning, I already had coffee going. She didn't look well rested. "Trevor, I'm sorry," she said, settling into a chair. "I shouldn't have pushed. I thought things were going well. And maybe if I nudged a little, we could get closer. I guess I overstepped." I poured a cup for her and took a seat. "I need to talk to your dad." Her expression crumbled. "Oh, crap. You're going to dump me, aren't you?" She sighed. "I tried, Trevor. I really tried. Can't we figure out a way for me to stay?" "That's not it, Hope. I don't want you to go. I just don't know how to keep living on board with you without things getting complicated. I like being with you." "It's the age thing, isn't it?" I nodded. "We've already crossed a line I never intended to cross. It's starting to make me feel like some dirty old man taking advantage of a young girl. I don't want to feel like that. And I definitely don't want your father looking at me that way." Hope sighed. "Trevor, why do you think my father rushed your divorce?" "That's what I wanted to ask you. Why would he do that?" She hesitated before answering. "Because I asked him to. I thought it might be important to you. I had no idea he'd actually do anything about it until you mentioned it. I was just hoping that if the divorce went through, maybe you wouldn't feel so guilty about us." She exhaled. "I think my dad wants us to stay together." I blinked. "Why? I'm way too old for you. You need someone young, a what? A young, virile guy?" She smirked. "Trevor, he's trying to offload me." That caught me off guard. She leaned forward. "I've been a spoiled brat my entire life. I've been nothing but a headache for my father. He feels responsible for me, but I think he's looking for a way out. Warren was supposed to be the solution, but he was a disaster." She paused. "By the way, my father picked Warren, not me." I let that sink in. "He's never even met me," I pointed out. Hope got up, pulling the English muffins from the toaster. We sat in silence, watching peanut butter melt into the warm crevices. The sun was rising, casting a golden glow over the water. The sky was clear, the day full of promise. Everything was peaceful. Hope smiled softly. "You never tried to tame me." It took less than 10 minutes for Franklin Holloway to wipe out every concern I had about my relationship with Hope. He wasn't just accepting. He was relieved that I was even considering staying with her. The conversation ended with a firm handshake, a grateful nod, and a weight lifted off my shoulders. Things were falling into place in ways I hadn't even planned for. The tug continued south at a steady, unhurried pace. We hit more open water than I generally liked, but the little boat handled itself well. Hope and I, now with nothing left to hold us back, finally consummated our relationship. And by finally, I mean she made sure I barely got a break. 3 days straight, relentless. I was half surprised at my own ability to keep up. Eventually, things settled into something more manageable, but she never let it rest entirely. Meanwhile, Brent kept me informed about the situation back home. Jocelyn had found out what happened to Finn, and she was devastated. Under the circumstances, she was quickly realizing that the divorce settlement money wasn't going to last long. And since the divorce wasn't technically final yet, she was already looking for ways to renegotiate. Fortunately, she had no idea where I was or how to get in touch with me. The plan to disappear had worked better than I could have hoped. Hope and I had no real schedule, but then a message from her father came through. Meet me in Fort Lauderdale next Saturday. GPS coordinates attached. That gave us plenty of time to take it easy. I decided I needed to get some proper clothes for the occasion, only to discover that most of my original wardrobe no longer fit. Turns out, months of living on the water had shed a lot of extra weight. Since I'd been wearing elastic waistbands, shorts, swim trunks, I hadn't even noticed. We made a quick stop in Delray Beach, where Hope had way too much fun picking out an entirely new wardrobe for me. Naturally, she found a few things for herself, too. By the time we reached our destination, everything was planned down to the minute. We arrived right on schedule. Lunch with Franklin Holloway went far better than expected. He wasn't just polite, he was genuinely happy to meet me. More than that, he seemed deeply grateful that I had formed a bond with Hope. All my anxieties had been pointless. Hope, surprisingly, remained quiet throughout the meal, staying close to my side. Afterward, Franklin suggested we take a walk through the marina. The conversation was casual, but I could tell he had a destination in mind. Eventually, we stopped in front of a brand new Nordic Tug 44. "Trevor, what do you think of this one?" Franklin asked, grinning like a cat that had just cornered a bird. The boat was perfect, everything about it. I took a slow walk along the dock, admiring every inch of it. Unlike my old tug, this one had a name. As I reached the stern, I stopped. Hope squeezed my hand, nearly cutting off circulation. We stood together, staring at the old English script painted across the back.